There we are. Hey, everyone. Hey, my name is James Swirsky. I'm a documentary filmmaker here in Winnipeg. And with me is Josh Tsui, the director of Insert Coin. Um, man, this movie's so fun. It was so great. Thank you so much for making it. And thank you so much for being here. And thank you, Media Manitoba, for putting this on, bringing us all together. Yeah, thanks so much. And so this movie, it feels like this behind the scenes oral history of my teenage years. And it feels like I'm not alone. It feels like there's so many people like me. Like I have these vivid memories, like emblazoned in my brain of like the first time I saw Smash TV, or the first time I saw Mortal Kombat, or NBA Jam, or the T2 machine. Like I could tell you them all. I could tell you the arcade. I could tell you the corner of the arcade. And like this, there's a cluster of my brain. And I didn't even realize that owes itself to Midway Games, and to think that that cluster is like directly linked to this group of guys in the back of a pinball factory in Chicago, kind of making it up as they're going along. It's just so fascinating, and then to hear them talk with such honesty and so candid and so enthusiastic and comfortably, like all this years back, it's just such a treat. It's such a fun movie. Thank you for making it.
Oh no, thanks, yeah, thanks for the kind words. Yeah, it's always great to hear that it triggers people's memories. Especially it's most likely was a very important time in their childhood at that time. So it's always great to hear that.
Oh, completely, completely. Now let's so we're doing a Q&A here, and it's a live Q&A. So if you have any questions for Josh, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll get to as many as we can. But to kind of start us off, Josh, kind of tell us about your background. Tell us about your background and like what brought you to making this movie.
Yeah, so I mean, my professional background is that I'm a game developer. I've been doing game development for 20 plus years, and I happen to have started my career at Midway Games in the '90s. So the film that you just saw was basically the era that I was working there, and it was my first, pretty much my first job out of college. I went to film school thinking I was going to be a film director. Got detoured into making video games because a friend of mine was working at Midway, and he suggested that I had a good working knowledge of how videos and computers work, so it'd be a perfect time to go in and work there. So I went in thinking that I was going to work at Midway for about a year and then go back, maybe move back to California and do filmmaking. And I just got sucked in, and it just happened to, I just happened to get sucked in at probably one of the best times in video game history, at least in the '90s. And so I did video games, and then after Midway, I went on and worked for EA, did some games for Microsoft and Activision, and so on.
Oh, sweet. So, like in documentary filmmaking, there's often like the movie that you start to make, and then the movie that you end up making. And there's like this movie could be like so many different things. Like it feels like each game could be its own mini documentary. There's a business story there. It could be a design doc. So talk to me about finding your way and like the evolution of this movie. Like where did you start and where did you end up?
Yeah, so I started off, because I had kind of lived through this era. I had a very good idea of what the story was likely going to be, and so much like you said, you kind of go in with the story, and I kind of knew that it was going to be heavy on Mortal Kombat and NBA Jam because they're very popular games. I knew a lot about them, so I knew I can get good stories from it. What I didn't anticipate was going into it and learning about everything that led up to those games. There's a lot of technology, a lot of ideas, a lot of personalities that had to get formed before those games became what they are. And so if you look at a game like Mortal Kombat with its over-the-top violence and its humor and everything else, that didn't happen in a vacuum. It wasn't like Ed Boon and John Tobias just decided, oh, we're going to make this crazy fighting game, so let's find out how it led to it. And so so really the part that was a little surprising was how much of an influence Eugene Jarvis was. And Eugene Jarvis being the creator of Defender and Robotron, classic 80s games, he came back to Williams in the 90s and just came in with this attitude of, we're just going to make something crazy and shock people and just have a lot of fun and make ourselves entertain and see what happens with it. And it just kind of went from there. And just seeing how that changed the studio from the 80s and into the 90s was really interesting to see how it just came from this one person who we call the godfather of video games.
Mm-hmm. And did it, like, when you did spend time at Midway, like in your time there, did it feel revolutionary? Like, did it feel like you guys were creating these things that had like this cultural impact, and that you were like living in a golden age? Or did it just feel like you were just making games and that's what you were doing?
I think it felt like both. For myself personally, I had a very good idea of how big things were. Were starting to develop at that time, and so I always kind of kept a lot of notes, and I made sure that I actually walked around with my own video camera and shot a lot of things during that time, because I had come into the studio right after the first Mortal Kombat. Actually, I should say after Mortal Kombat was already big and NBA Jam was starting to really get huge. And so there was already kind of a wave, going on. But then we were starting to work with WWE, and Aerosmith was coming in our studios, and Macaulay Culkin, who was shooting of Richie Rich in Chicago, wanted to visit the studio. So within the group ourselves, we knew, it's like, man, we're starting to feel like we're big deals because people are actually wanting to come work with us. And so, so it felt pretty historic at the time already. And like I said, because of that, I kept pretty, accurate records of things that are going on, or a lot of behind the scenes type things. And but it was a lot of fun. I should say, though, at the same time, we loved making video games. So it's not like, it's not like we're walking around saying, oh, we're famous or anything like that. It was always like, hey, we're making video games. This is like a kid's dream come true. And so that always kept us grounded.
Yeah. That's so cool, because the archival in this film is so amazing. Like I could watch 90 minutes of just like split screens of like the blue screen footage and the resulting stuff. Tell me about the story of the archival. Like, so often these things, are like in the back of someone's drawer, or, like so close to being, thrown out, or, it just not treated the way at like historical documents. Like this footage should be in the Smithsonian. Like, where was it, and how did you get it?
Yeah, so Midway was really unusual, at least from what I've gathered from other studios. Midway was really unusual in that they documented a lot of things, and part of it is because Midway's time back then, the primary business was arcades, and so they would make a lot of videos to be sent to arcade distributors and arcade owners to help sell the games. And so we had a creative media department that shot a lot of behind the scenes stuff, and that's a lot of the footage that's in the film. And so, they were shooting a 3/4 and Betacam back in the day and everything, and they would do all these editing, but they kept all the raw footage around. And so there was literally a room just full of tapes for the longest time that nobody cared about. And what ended up happening was that, so it's just been sitting there for decades. And what ended up happening was that when Midway went bankrupt and Warner Brothers basically took over much of the IP, they were clearing out the old studio, and literally they were going to start just throwing stuff into the dumpsters. And what happened was somebody at Midway, I forgot who it was, contacted Ken Fedesna, who's the VP of production, and he's also in the film. Somebody contacted Ken Fedesna and told him, like, hey, they're dumping all of this material. You might want to just come down and rescue them. So he actually showed up with his SUV and just took all the tapes with him and brought it back to his office, because he was at a new company, and just had them sitting there. And so when I started Insert Coin, I didn't know about those. I just had some of my own personal collections, and I had a feeling some people had tapes of their own. But I found out Ken had literally a room of tapes, and I asked him, like, can I have access to this? And luckily he had no problems letting me have access to it. So I digitized a ton of them, for him and everything. And that saved my ass. That was, it was really nice to have that. And the nice thing about it is, since then, he has donated it to the Strong Museum in Rochester, New York. And so all of his tapes, including his own and his own archival materials of notes that he took over 40 years of video game development, they're all at the Strong, all in one place. they're keeping it nice and safe and archiving everything properly. So it's a really happy ending to a story, because otherwise it would just been thrown away. Nobody would be able to see any of it.
Yeah. Oh my God. God bless whoever called him, and God bless him for picking it up. That story filled me with so much anxiety and then relief. I'm gonna switch over to the chat here because we got some questions piling up. Let's see. So first one is, documentaries like this are an important way to capture the early days of video game culture. What other parts of video game history would you like to see captured?
Boy, I think there are many things that I think could be captured. I think what's something that is pretty important, and I think people should really understand the process of it, because that way it'll make them understand how important it is video game archiving. I have a lot of friends who work in that field, and because of various reasons such as copyrights and just corporations being very wary of piracy and just want to protect their IPs, they don't necessarily make it easy for people to archive old games. And so a lot of time, man, these are digital products, so those games can disappear extremely quickly. And so there are times where people need to do kind of, I don't want to say illegal things, but kind of borderline illegal things to make sure that games are preserved. And it really shouldn't be that way. Some companies take archiving old games more serious than others, but there's a rich history of video games out there, not just from the last 20 years, but almost back 40, 50 years that molded a lot of us in, when we were younger, that are going to be gone forever. So that's something that I've always been interested in. I think if not me, like somebody should really show what can happen when this isn't done right, and what part of our culture can disappear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It feels like we're playing catch up with respect to like archiving software, and like it's a race against time. And because there's a lot of people popping up now, and like amazing organizations out there doing it, but they can only do so much. Let's see, going back to the chat here, is there anything that you wish you knew when you first began in this industry than what you know now? Anything that you wish you knew before you got in?
So I'm assuming for getting into the video game industry.
Sorry. Sure. Yeah. And then there's a second follow-up also related, and any tips you could give for someone beginning in video games.
Gotcha. So, I mean, it's interesting, in the era that I started video games, it was kind of, and you kind of saw it in the film, it was a little bit of the Wild West. So going in kind of blindly, everybody was going in blindly at the time. I think, I think beyond that though, one of the things that, and this has less to do with Midway, but for myself personally, is I feel like I wish I had known more about the business aspects of video games, or the video game industry. I went in as an artist, and I was always in the art and design part of things. And the documentary kind of touches on the business of arcades. I think, if I had more of a business sense later on in life when I started up my own game studios, I think that would have given me more firmer ground to do even more things than I've already done. So, there's a great saying that someone told me. It's like, hey, it's called show business, not show art. And so when you're making a commercial video game, you have to basically think about as much about the business end of that game as you do on the creative end. So, and that's just for sustainability purposes.
When you were at Midway, was there a tension between the dev team and the business side, or how did those two interact?
Yeah, it's interesting. So there really wasn't. So Midway was unusual, at least at that time, in that the business end of things, the financials and the marketing end of things, never bothered the dev teams. And this is during the arcade era, and because they knew that, the only, like with arcade games, the only way an arcade game would be a hit is if it's a really good game. There's no real marketing for arcade games. And so nobody really told us what to do. It was just like, just make sure you're on budget and on time. We almost don't even care what game you make, So that was very liberating. And I always kind of joke that Midway, the development teams at Midway were probably like the most well-funded indie game group out there. Like, I feel like we're like the original indies, and that nobody really cared about what we're doing as long as it was got done and is out there. And so the business end of things really kind of left us alone. If there was any tension, it was ironically within the game teams themselves. So there was a lot of tension between different teams, because not just wanting to make better games than each other, but they knew that because there were royalties involved, they wanted to keep one-upping each other, and people would get stolen from one team to another. If one game was making incredible royalty money, all the other team members would want to go to that. So there was a lot of that going on, which is really strange.
Yeah, that would be an interesting workplace environment for sure.
It was.
So talk to me a little bit about your interview subject process. Like a lot of them obviously were coworkers of yours. So how did you? But then you have people like Tom Kalinske and Ernest Klein, and how did you reach out and get those guys, or how did you grow your doc that way?
Oh, so I mean, obviously with the people that I used to work with, those it was easy to interview them, because it was just like having a conversation with a person at a bar, that you've known for a long time. And so I was very fortunate in that, I didn't burn any bridges in my career, so they were more than happy to talk to me. And 20 years have passed, 20 plus years have passed, and so they were all very anxious to talk about this incredible era, and they were all very candid about it. When it came to the people outside of Midway, I was kind of shocked how easy that was also. Like Ernest Klein's a really great story where I had just picked up Armada, and I had read Ready Player One, and then I just picked up Armada, and the first quote in Armada is a quote from Eugene Jarvis talking about how the only real use of a computer is to play video games. And so when I saw that, I kind of felt like, man, maybe there's a sign there. And so I literally tweeted to him, it's like, hey, I have this movie I'm working on. I sent him a link to the trailer. Can you DM me if you're interested in, because I would love to interview for it. And lo and behold, he DM'd me, and he basically just said, like, yeah, I have 2 hours on this date. If you can come to Austin, Texas, and to do it, I'm more than happy to. So that's literally, I bought tickets the next day, went down, no questions asked. And we ended up talking for like 4 hours, and it was just an incredible interview. Tom was introduced to me by Blake from Console Wars, and his last name is like, I can't remember right now, but Blake who wrote Console Wars,
Blake J. Harris, yeah.
Blake Harris, yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So Blake Harris, I've talked with Blake before I've known him just through online, like social media and things. And in talking with them, he asked, hey, is there anything I can do to help? And I mentioned, I might do something about, the whole Sega Nintendo thing. And he's like, I can introduce you to Tom Kalinske. So I got a hold of Tom through Blake, and I just told Tom, I was like, I'm going to be at GDC, can you give me an hour of your time? And it's like, yeah, no problem. So people were like really happy to want to talk about things. I think the subject matter, because I was very, I would tell them what the subject matter was and what they were going to be talking about, so they weren't coming in blind. So I think that helped things out.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it is like very evident through the movie that like everybody is like almost eager to talk to you. Like it seems like this movie kind of like the opportunity to be in this movie came at like the perfect time for them, like where like it feels like they were sitting on these stories for like a decade, and they're just coming out, and they've been waiting to tell these stories. Like it does seem like timing played a huge part in the production of this movie. Like if you tried to make it earlier when a lot of these IPs were still ongoing things, perhaps it would be tougher to get those stories. But speak on the timing of it. Like
definitely. I mean, I think it being like 20 years later, it's like the attitude from a lot of people was, it's about time somebody wants to talk about this, so they were all ready to. And like I said, the passage of time allowed people to be more candid about things, and which was really nice. I really wasn't expecting that. In fact, that was one of my primary worries going into the interviews, was that people were going to hold back on things because they didn't, for whatever reason, they didn't want to offend somebody or something. But being so far away from that time, a lot of the politics are gone. They find it more funny than anything else. So that certainly helped. But yeah, it was. I think if there's anything that I'm extremely proud of is just the way the interviews came off, and it was just a really nice conversation with everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does feel like people are just like sharing stories at the bar in the best way possible.
Yep.
Let's see. We have another question in the chat here. That era, the Midway era, could be considered the golden age of co-op or coin-op. Do you think we're approaching something similar with VR, or was this just kind of like a one-time only sort of thing?
Yeah, that's interesting. In many ways, it depends on who you talk to. But a lot of people actually say like the 80s were the golden age of coin-op. If you think about it, like during the original Pac-Man era and Defender and all. I mean, those games sold like tons. Like Defender sold 50,000 units. If you think about that, each unit was a few $1,000s. That's an incredible amount of money. So it depends on who you ask. The 80s or 90s are going to be very different for each other. In regard, I believe that there's going to be another really incredible era and they don't call them arcades anymore. They're more like location-based entertainment. And I think there's going to be another era of that coming, especially coming out of COVID. Obviously, I think the technology is going to change the kind of to help people be more comfortable about, touching joysticks that are out in the public and things like that. But what that technology is, I have no idea. But I'm very confident that like something will happen that will get people excited about it. Because people in general, they want to go out and do things. People love obviously playing games at home, but there's nothing better than being out and socializing with people. And I guess you can see a hint of that pre-COVID in regards to barcades. Barcades were booming up until fairly recently, and because people love being out and about. If I can have a beer and play a great game, fantastic. And so I think something will come through on that. Whether it's VR or not, that's still a tough sell. Like VR. To me, I love VR, so I want to make that clear. But VR to me feels kind of like Linux. Everyone says this is the year of the Linux, and so everyone say this is the year of VR, and it very well might be. But it's the weird thing about VR is that it closes you off from other people. At least in this current state of things. And arcades, the whole appeal of them is you're playing around people, you're showing off to people, you're playing co-op and things like that. It's highly social in nature, and VR in its current stages doesn't quite do that, and it kind of makes people a little uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, I'm gonna go back into the chat here. What is your favorite Mortal Kombat game?
Oh man, I would say Mortal Kombat 2 is my favorite one. It looks stunning. I mean, I think it still looks stunning to this day. The artwork in that game is highly underrated. I have to give a shout out, and I kind of wish I had given him some screen time. I have to give a shout out to Tony Goski, who was, in my opinion, the best pixel artist that's out there. I mean, definitely the best one that I've ever seen. And he did a lot of the incredible backgrounds in Mortal Kombat 2. And and a lot of people don't realize like those were not digitized photos. Some elements might have been digitized, but the backgrounds, I mean, it's him in deluxe paint on an Amiga, pixel by pixel, just crafting this beautiful artwork and all the animations in it. So if you ever get a chance to look at Mortal Kombat 2 again, really like look at the background. They're amazing. But like the characters are big, the fighting is fantastic. If you finish off as Sub-Zero in the game, they use my face as Sub-Zero, so obviously I'm biased about that too.
I was getting around to that as well. Yeah. I wonder if I can bring up the picture. Oh well, you can Google a picture. It's a very smoldering look. And then also tell us the story about you becoming Sub-Zero.
Yeah, so it was it was very early on when I first started at Midway. I think it was literally within the first couple of weeks I was there, and I was working on the WWE, or back then it was WWF, WrestleMania, the arcade game, and that was with the NBA Jam team, and then the Mortal Kombat team were right next door to us, office space wise. And John Tobias, who's the co-creator of Mortal Kombat, he basically just came up and was like, "Hey, I need a face, for the game. Can I take a picture of you?" And it's like, "Yeah, sure. I'm not going to say no." It's like, it's John Tobias. So he took a picture of me, and then and I wasn't quite sure what it was going to be, but then later on I found out that it was that for Sub-Zero's ending in Mortal Kombat 2, he takes off his mask and they use my face, and the running joke, and it's actually not really a joke, is that there were no other Asians in the entire building, I don't think, and so I think they needed an Asian face, and I just happened to be there. During that era of Midway Games, if there was an Asian character, 7 out of 10 times it's usually my face that they put in. I just happen to be around. I'm super easy. They fed me some pizza or something.
Oh, that's and now you live forever, and you can go to fan expos and be Sub-Zero. Oh, that's so kind of the death of Midway. Why do you think Midway couldn't, because there's obviously so much talent there and they knew what they were doing, but why couldn't they transition successfully or seamlessly into consoles?
I mean, early on it was when console, especially when the CD-ROM came about and consoles started becoming more powerful than arcade machines, there was a lot of growing pains that Midway had to go through. And if you think about Midway, and before Midway it was Williams, you're talking about decades of designing a certain type of game, which is a game that has to be played in very quick bites, that is supposed to suck in a quarter every 40 seconds or so. It's a very different style. And so when you have something like the PlayStation 1 where a CD-ROM comes in and you can play a game like Tomb Raider or Metal Gear for 30 to 40 hours, you can't design an arcade style game. It would just be too repetitive. It just didn't make any sense. It's the equivalent of, arcade games were basically the equivalent of a short story, while a CD-ROM based game is a novel. And so, all of the designers at Midway at the time had arcade style games in their DNA. And so it took a long time to kind of undo that. And initially, Midway was pretty successful in the home market because they were just translating arcade games, and the general public, were fine with that. They didn't know any better. But then when you got these long form games coming in, then people realized, oh, wait, games can go in this direction. Why, now this other style of games, which is arcades, feels kind of archaic in nature. And so, it took Midway a long time to kind of figure that out, and then also kind of change the old guard of designers into a new generation. And the irony is that in the 2000s, they started getting into that direction. They were starting to get the right people in, but at that point, it was just they didn't move fast enough, and that's what led to their bankruptcy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Like a whole different skill set.
Yeah, exactly. And the irony is that they stayed around longer, and granted, part NetherRealms, which is used to be Midway, now it's part of Warner Brothers. The irony is that if they stuck around long enough and did mobile games, that arcade style games goes right into mobile games. And Mark Turmell, the creator of NBA Jam, has incredible success working at Zynga now, creating mobile games, and because he understands how to do these short bursts of gameplay that monetizes really well.
Yeah. Are you
Oops, sorry. I think it froze here.
Are you able to do like a quick whereas? Oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That may have been me. Am I back?
Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no problem. How about like a little, like, where are they now? Like, where is George Pedro?
Yeah, so George Pedro, he runs a company called Play Mechanics, and George had left Midway to start Play Mechanics, and they make arcade games. And the irony is that Eugene Jarvis also had eventually left Midway to start up Raw Thrills, another arcade company. And they both had great success, with their new styles of arcade games. And what ended up happening is that Eugene Jarvis's company ended up buying Play Mechanics from George Pedro, so now they're working together again.
Cool.
So they've been together for decades now.
Awesome. And how about John Tobias?
John Tobias. Me and John Tobias actually left Midway together to form our own companies, and then and so we had a company called Studio Gigante for quite a few years, and then we've moved on to other things. But he is now the creative director for a new studio in San Diego that's owned by Warner Brothers. So that's just starting up, and so he's super happy for what they're doing there.
Awesome. Cool. I won't go down the whole list. I got the counts here. You had 1,000 people in the movie. So what was we're getting close to the end here, getting close to 45 minutes. Sure. So if you have any other questions, feel free to throw them in chat there and we'll get to them, or we'll try and get to them. So looking back in the process of doing this movie and looking back at your time with Midway, do you look at your time at Midway any different now?
No, I mean, I've always been fond of my time at Midway. I think if anything, I'm even more grateful for that time there because mainly because, you know, the people who participated in the documentary, they really showed, you know, how much they loved the studio back then, but they also were so gracious with their time with me that it really showed that they cared enough about me to want to do this, you know, because it's not like they got paid to do it, you know, and they've done a lot of post launch help also, and they've just done a lot of things for the film, and it was just really out of the goodness of their heart, and so that has made me appreciate that time even more because, you know, now, you know, it showed that I've worked with really great people, and so we were all friends, obviously, you know, before this, but now there's a whole nother level of you know, brotherhood amongst us, and so, you know, so that has changed, you know, a lot, and I'm super grateful for it.
Oh, awesome! That's beautiful. I was gonna say that's a beautiful place to end it, but another question, and that is a beautiful place to end it, right. But we won't.
Epilogue.
But that would have been the perfect place. But there's another question here. What is Joshua doing these days other than making movies? Are you still making any games?
So I took a break from games, partly because I really wanted to finish this film, but also I got really burnt out around 2017. I had me and my partners, we had a game studio, and we basically our team got absorbed into another company, and so that, to me at that time, it was like, okay, it's either stay in games or maybe I'll take a break from it. And so I decided to kind of take a break from it, and so that was like, man, now I realize it's like over 3 years ago. And so I worked mainly on the film. I took as much time as I can to do that, but then the last few years, I've also been working in experiential design, and I've been very fortunate in doing that because it really combines what I've been doing in video games with my newfound skills in filmmaking and kind of combining them together. And so I've been doing a lot of things that, without getting into too big a detail, I'm working on a couple of large installations where people go to a venue and they're surrounded by multimedia visuals all around them. It's almost like, you know, being in VR without a headset. It's the only thing I can really say. But I've been involved with that. I've been working with an experiential tour at the new SoFi Stadium out in Los Angeles, and a couple of other projects. So I've been trying to. It's been nice to kind of explore some new things coming off of games and video and filmmaking, and kind of combining them together at the same time.
Oh man, that sounds amazing. Yeah. I guess, yeah, we should probably wrap it up. We should probably wrap it up there. But where can people go to find more about this film?
Oh yeah, So the best place to go is insertcoindoc.com. That's doc.com, and from there, you know, you can see the trailer for the film and find out some more info. But there's links to all the VOD platforms. And also for the Blu-ray itself. And so, yeah, if you go there, you'll find, you know, all the information you need. Awesome.
And if they want to follow up with you and follow where you're going?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fairly active on Twitter. So it's Josh YTSUI. That's I think that's my only public social media thing I do. So, but if you go there, I don't talk much about the film or games. I just talk a lot about food. So so if you're really into food, definitely go hit there.
And who is it?
But there is a Twitter for the film, which is insert coin doc
Awesome.
at insert coin doc, I should say.
Awesome. Well, Josh, this has been fantastic, and the movie is so fun to watch and so great. And thank you so much again for making it. Thank you for being here. Thank you, New Media Manitoba, and John and his team there for making this all happen. And yeah, this has been great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you. No, thanks to everybody. This has been a real thrill, and it's so great to talk to you all. And thank you for watching the film.
See you guys.